So our subject is John Muir, and my question for you is, were you familiar with John Muir before hearing about this project?
Absolutely. He's pretty much of a hero of mine. Yeah.
How did you get introduced to him?
I can't remember when I didn't exactly know about him. I've been to Muir Woods in California, but in the last couple of years, I've been involved with Indiana Forest Alliance. They're one of my pet causes. I love that organization, and I'm lucky enough to live within walking distance of some woodsy areas. So I get out in the woods quite a lot, and I love John Muir's quotes. I love his philosophy and what comes through. You know, anytime that I've read about him or read any of his quotes. So, and it's kind of a mirror of how I feel. It's,
So in this particular case, you've been given a subject, right? So this image of John Muir, who is riding out a storm, climbs up to the top of this Douglas fir and just embraces the storm and weather. And with that being the case, given a subject, what are the initial steps that you take as you think about bringing your creativity to work? So before paint goes to brush.
I know it'll sound kind of, I don't know how it'll sound dippy or whatever, but I really feel that story. It's about breathing and taking a deep breath and really feeling that story or that experience. I have a real bent toward illustration and book art, so I really try not to be too literal in the way that I interpret a story like that. I mean, because I work with children for a long time, I have a tendency toward illustrating something so someone will understand it. So, I mean, my initial impression might be just to draw John Muir up, and that would be really fun. But I think it's more important as an artist, well, not always, but in this case, to feel it. To feel that and to feel, and then I think as people do when they hear a story, we try to relate. What's something that happened to me that reminds me of this, or just how did I feel, or how would I feel? What's it smell like to be out in the woods in the rain? Because I've certainly been caught outside walking, and I get a torrential downpour, and try to get home with the dogs. So I feel like I really try to get in that place where I'm having that experience. Or at least relating to that experience.
Absolutely.
And even sensually and stuff.
So what would you say, were there any specific images or image that captured your imagination?
I love, another part of me is I love words. And so I loved, one of my pieces is called A Sea of Wild Pines. And I totally get that whole idea of the pines moving, just bending and swirling and everything, and being like a sea instead of a forest. I think about the colors that come to mind. That first bold line, another glorious day. Well, I love that because I experienced that. And it's so funny because a couple weeks ago I was in Colorado and my son and I were out hiking and it was fabulous, and I kept thinking about that song, and even where we were reminded me of the graphics that are, or the images that they have in the YouTube version. It was really amazing. So they're definitely and the other one that I when the music slows down and they start talking about here you'll find rest. And as somebody who I kind of go until I hit the wall and
Yeah.
crash, right?
Yep, I'm right
The
there with you.
idea of finding the fact that there's a place where I can go and find peace or rest. And I totally relate to that because that's where I go when I'm, dealing with something
Sure.
that I need to figure out.
Yeah.
Being outside and just having trees around,
Yeah. Right.
these sentient beings, it's yeah. pretty
Yeah, I
special.
appreciate you sharing it. There's not this distinction between your art and your life. As I hear you talk, there's overlap, and just taking on, John Muir's adventurous, childlike curiosity, and just his welcoming of beauty. And then wanting to share that experience with others. It's just an amazing individual. So you mentioned listening to the choral piece because the indie choral artisans will be singing this piece, and so you have the opportunity to listen to the song. How do you think your interpretation, your pieces would have been different by not hearing the song? Or how did the music add to your creative process?
Well, first of all, one of my pieces, because I was explaining to you earlier, I didn't find out about the show until a little bit late in the game, but I'm a printmaker, so printmakers are all about multiple originals. And I had a piece that struck me immediately as a print that would lend itself to this show and to the music. And it's called Sanctuary, and I call it Sanctuary. I've also called it Cathedral in the Woods because in my spiritual journey, it's one of the things that I've realized as an adult at this point in my life is that being in the woods is like being in church for me. In fact, it's more like church than church. And I think about how does being in church facilitate my spiritual experience? And I think about the things that I love about church. And one of the things I've always loved about church was the atmosphere, the art, the stained glass, the windows. The big stained glass windows to me are an amazing part of my spiritual journey in terms of things that I love about church. Well, walking in the woods day after day, one of the things I started to notice and I started to really be cognizant of was the way that the twigs and the branches intersected in such a way that they almost, I would look up and say, well, gosh, they look like stained glass in a way. And they crisscross and the design that they make. And then I even noticed trees that were bent over in such a way that they looked like an arch or, so that the shapes of trees began to have architectural.
Yeah, Gothic.
Yeah,
maybe.
exactly.
Yeah.
Just an architectural feel to them.
Sure.
And so I did an etching, a copper plate etching of trees coming together and the branches mixing and creating that arch. And then I painted into it. I am doing 5 of these, and so the 5th of the 5 was the one I did for this show. And I wanted to be really intentional about making sure that this piece, even though it was one of multiple originals, I wanted to make sure that it was specifically in tune with this music. So when I went to paint, I just took that deep breath and got in the zone, and I painted it while listening to that music over and over and over again. I mean, it would end, and it's like, okay, start it again. And I was just reading a story about Wassily Kandinsky. He had a genetic predisposition where he heard color. He could hear color. There's a novel that I just read about, you know, the woman who heard color, and so I've been really fascinated by that lately. And I don't hear color exactly, but I certainly have emotional responses to sounds that I could represent through color.
Yeah.
You know,
Sure.
like a sound that brings up a color for me.
Right.
And that was really fun to play with, especially when I was, you know,
Yeah.
thinking about that, thinking
Yeah.
about people who hear color. Well, what colors come up for me while I'm listening to this music, whether it's the sound itself, and in some cases the phrase, the
Sure.
phrasing, you know, what colors come up for me. And
Right.
so that was real fun to do.
Yeah.
You know, and each one of these, even though it started with the same print, each one is distinctly different than the others, and this one's no exception.
Yeah.
You know, the colors that ended up really coming out for me.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, when I think of a glorious day, it's a day that's filled with light and brightness,
Yeah.
and you know, and yet you have the dark moments in this that,
Yeah.
yeah. So that was, yeah,
I
that's
appreciate
great.
you sharing that.